What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and in the attempt to get back to more semi-regular content, our good friends over at Kobold Press have actually done some of the work for me by introducing what they're now calling TOV Tuesday. If you recall, back at the post-OGL situation, we were getting Black Flag Friday from Kobold Press, and now that we are approaching the final kind of release of Tales of the Valiant in its full form, they now decided to do a TOV Tuesday. There have been 2 of these articles so far, so we're going to cover both of them in this video, and then going forward, the plan is to cover them each Tuesday when they release. So let's go ahead and dive into that. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Let's see what they have to say. All right. This was the first one on April 2nd. Hi, this is Jeff Yeel, blog editor and coincidentally lead editor and developer for the Tales of the Valiant Player's Guide. We're launching Tales of the Valiant Player Guide and Monster Vault very soon. Last year, when we decided to hoist the black flag and take the feature of 5 into our own hands, our senior designer Celeste Conowich laid out concept notes. That document has now fallen to me. The document contains a lot of seminal thinking about what TOV emphasizes as a fork of the SRD and parts of the 5e experience that we thought we could improve on. Today, we're taking one section of that document called, quote, 5e complaints to fix. And Celeste and I are going to talk about how we tackled them, some approaches that worked, some that didn't, and any interesting digressions that pop up along the way. My comments are in black, Celeste's are in blue. Race as a concept. Race as a concept in RPGs is something that doesn't quite work right. If your dwarf character was an orphan raised among halflings, why would he know how to use a battle axe? That's a weird disconnect and one we can fix. Celeste, once upon a time, we had only 3 or 4 novel series to turn to when we needed definitive facts about fantasy race called an elf or what a dwarf was. And those novels became the foundation of how we thought about fantasy with good reason. But the fantasy genre has exploded beyond that source material. We have more stories than ever featuring and focusing on fantastical people, and honestly, it no longer makes any sense to say, yep, a dwarf means you're good at swinging axes. Any heroic fantasy adventurer can learn to swing an axe. So we started doing the thing that science fiction figured out a long time ago, defining different types of creatures by super neat biological adaptations like breathing in water, not needing sleep, hyper sharp senses, the ability to see in the dark, etc. Once those inborn traits were established, we could create heritage options to represent learned behaviors. But as much DNA as sci-fi and fantasy share, they still feel different. We need to maintain what makes fantasy feel like fantasy, so rather than turn race into species, my preferred term was phenotype, but somehow that didn't catch on, we settled on lineage. In a bigger, weirder fantasy idea space than Tolkien created, we need ideas that are more encompassing. Decoupling biological and learned traits in this way allows us to create yet another opportunity for players to enrich their characters' backstories, which is always a great thing in our book. This is kind of a general shift in the fantasy paradigm that we've seen kind of happen. Wizards of the Coast is, I think they were using species. I don't know if I think they changed from that. Species was their original thing. It's what we'd heard of when they started launching it. It's what they were leaning towards when we were at the summit in April of last year. But I think they ultimately landed. Did they go for lineage as well? I forget. We'll check on that once we get something a little more, or go back and look. Or origin. They might have gone with origin, I think, actually, now that I think about it. So I'm fine with this. This makes sense, right? Again, especially the instances mentioned here where you're saying, like, if you're a dwarf raised by halflings, the ability to inherently swing an axe is not an inborn biological trait. That is a learned thing you figure out over time with training. So that makes sense to me. I understand that concept. They are separating out lineage and heritage in Tales of the Valiant, whereas I believe we're just going with origin on the WotC side. All right, ability scores tied to race. This one I don't even feel like I truly need to read here, but Wizards of the Coast basically stopped doing this as well, with the concept of adding +2, +1 just being a thing. It is technically still tied to the race, right? It's just like whatever origin you pick gives you a +2, +1, or +1 to 3. So while it's tied to the race in a way, it's not really, because it's just kind of 2 errant numbers that you can just add in anywhere. Again, that's what they're going to talk about here, is that Tales of the Valiant removed that +2, +1 from the actual race, or I'm sorry, the lineage. It's now just like a thing you do in stat creation and character creation, not something that's tied to, again, what was the race specifically. Again, we're kind of seeing the shift in not quantifying hard numbers to that with most, or with a variety of things. Some still do consider, I know Pathfinder, for example, still has the kind of more, they have some variability in what you choose, but they do still have like your race provides, whatever it does. All right. Having ability scores pumped or junked according to race is something we heard a lot of from fans. Here's the thing. It's ridiculous to say that every human in the real world is actually strong, fast, or charismatic as every other human. It doesn't take a game designer to tell you that. Sure, some folks are born with an aptitude for certain skills or talents, but ultimately the choice we make in our lifetime determines our overall statistics. You might be born with a powerful frame, but you must spend years training and exercising to become a professional weightlifter. Some people are born with great instincts, but true wisdom, etc. All right, so if you follow that line of thought, why design mechanics to force a person, whether a human, dwarf, or whatever, to have stats that reflect that? It's certainly easier to say all orcs are strong and never have to learn or think about orcs any other way, but in a world where we're forging more human bonds, blah, blah, blah. So like I said, that's something we kind of have strayed away from. Again, WotC does still technically tie those numbers to the origin of the character, but it's not like a specifics like it was in the 2014 Player's Handbook and in previous editions where you were with a +2 strength, +1 con, or whatever it was. It's now kind of just choose the numbers. Tales of the Valiant just says like, okay, assign your ability scores and then add 2 to one and 1 to another. So either way, same kind of concept, just different execution. The Ranger problem. Okay, let's see. Has the Ranger ever not been a problem? I mean, the Ranger has had an unquestionably rough history in tabletop games. Everyone seems to love the idea of the Ranger, but time after time, the Ranger's mechanics fail to make those ideas work. I've seen so many new players roll into my games excited to play their shiny new Ranger class, then walk away feeling like they didn't get the same experience in play that they were promised on paper. Again, I think a lot of this comes down to, we were talking a little bit about Tolkien in here too, right? Depends on your perception of what a ranger is. Some people perceive their ranger to be like Aragorn, which I would argue that Aragorn is more of a fighter than he is a ranger. Yes, he has access and knowledge to things of the wilds and nature, but a lot of that can be replicated in various ways with like proficiencies and skills. But ultimately, he's a good fighter, right? And then some people will think Drizzt. I'd say that Drizzt is also a fighter. I think I've complained. We'll see what they say here, but I've complained probably my biggest issue with the Ranger, in my opinion, regardless of all the comments that will say otherwise, is they don't truly have a unique identity. They kind of borrow aspects from different things. And if you think that the Ranger's always good and it always has been good, I would encourage you to look at the number of Unearthed Arcana attempts Wizards of the Coast has made internally to fix the Ranger. They've attempted it like 4 or 5 times with a variety of things. One, they even were giving them 2d6 hit dice as an option. They have the revised Ranger. They have all the spellless Ranger, all these different things they were trying because they knew something was wrong. Now, I don't know what we're ultimately going to see later this year, what the final version looks like. According to WotC, minor tweaks based off of the last version of the Ranger, or the Ranger is going to be a kind of an amalgamation of the different versions of the Ranger we saw in the Unearthed Arcana playtest of it for the one D&D playtest, if you will. I don't know. Let's see what Tales of the Valiant has to say. I love a Ranger. I played plenty in my time, but I've had a different experience as a GM. I've rarely had players try one because there's this received wisdom that they suck a little. When you've got so many classes to choose from, you don't want to pick the one that everyone agrees is lame. This is also something that I will agree to and attest to, right? There is the general perception that Rangers are done dirty, and that if that's a constant thing that is, and I'm not gonna, I'll apologize for my part in it, that people are constantly kind of shitting on the Ranger, and in doing so, it kind of has received a negative stigma. If you play Ranger and you love it, then that's great, and I love that for you. But I think we can all, to some degree, agree that it pales in comparison to certain other classes in what it can do. And also, realistically, a lot of it will come down to, like, does your GM allow you a lot of wilderness survival style checks to make? Because if that doesn't really happen, it doesn't really work that well, because that's a lot of what the original class features and things were tied to. I will say I do think Baldur's Gate 3 did a pretty good job of updating the Ranger, and I do actually enjoy playing a Ranger in Baldur's Gate 3 more so than I would in 5e. But from Aragorn on down, there's a place in the canon for this kind of character being a thing, and damn it, Rangers should be cool. I think we've got a really good take on the Ranger this time. The moment we started fiddling with base classes, giving the Ranger the glow up they deserve was a clear priority after grappling with the Ranger problem for weeks. Years, really. We identified our core task to focus on enhancing the things the Ranger was conceptually good at. We focused on targeted prey, having a wide variety of skills and adaptability to terrain, and we cut away any conditional restraints that limited how and when those strengths could be used. Things like great at moving quickly through forest terrain were upgraded to features like good at climbing in any terrain. Things like good at tracking favored foes became good at tracking all foes. With the removal of all those conditions, Rangers get to be cool more often. They get to be the character that's good at picking out one enemy and bringing that foe down across space and time, even if that space happens to be an inconvenient type of terrain. The fact that our Ranger class redesign won playtester approval across the board, even at its earliest stages of playtesting, by far and away more than any other base class, has us grinning ear to ear. I have seen it. I don't know if we've ever done a video on it or not, but we'll do a video on it once the final official version has released. And that was all we had for the original Tales of the Valiant TOV Tuesday. Let's jump now to TOV Tuesday number 2, Mechanist excerpt from the Tales of the Valiant Player's Guide. Books are at the printer. We're here at the Warrens putting together the first act after the Tales of the Valiant Player's Guide to Monster Vault. Over on the Kobold Press Discord server, the fans have spoken. They want to see more of the Mechanist class. This is the sort of pseudo replacement, or the replacement essentially, for the Artificer. These 2 pages here give you the beginnings of the class and the progression table for all 20 levels. And now a word from our lead designer, Celeste Conowich. The first public look at the brand new Tales of the Valiant class, the Mechanist. Before we begin, I want to thank the hundreds of public and internal playtesters who helped bring this class to an absolute powerhouse. We hope you're proud of it as we are. A few things that make the Mechanist stand out, but here's one that might not be obvious. Mechanist is a martial class. The Mechanist can do a lot of mystical things through its augmentations, but it is not a spellcasting class. It's not even a half spellcasting class like the Ranger and Paladin. With flexible equipment, proficiencies, and features like efficient action, multi-attack, and rapid augment, the Mechanist is a damage dealer suited for melee or ranged combat with weapons. Fun fact, while the Mechanist class has phenomenal abilities around the design and construction of objects, the class's name is primarily due to the first Oxford dictionary definition, a person who believes in the doctrine of mechanism. Mechanism is a philosophical belief that the universe functions as a complex machine. You always have an item for that. The Mechanist's Shard of Creation feature allows them to make any non-magical item instantly. Some folks may read on that page and go, so? I assure you anyone who's ever loved MacGyver, Inspector Gadget, Batman, or Fullmetal Alchemist will consider this feature the it thing for this class. Even the most basic version of this feature that unlocks at level 1 allows a Mechanist to expend a charge to transform their shard into any weapon, shield, or object of medium size. That means, wake up in a cell without your equipment, no worries, your shard can become the sword, crowbar, or whatever you need to enact your clever escape plan. You need to lasso a runaway bandit, but your companions forgot to buy more rope. Who cares? You can always make rope instantly. Companions being picked off one by a squadron of archers, all good, make a barrier and provide the gang with some cover. The creative uses are truly endless, and the possibilities only get more delightful as the shard gets more powerful at higher Mechanist levels. So you can see it is a D10 hit die here. Light armor, medium armor, shields, simple and martial weapons, tinker tools, and 2 additional tools of your choice. A couple of skill proficiencies. And then we have... They're a little blurry, but we'll go ahead and read them anyway. It says, Eyes of the Maker. When you touch a magic item or other magic-imbued object, you learn its properties and how to use it, whether it requires augmentation, or attunement to use, rather, and how many charges it has, if any. You learn whether any spells are affecting the item and what they are. If the item was created by a spell, you learn which spell created it. So this is kind of like an insta detect magic identify that you have, which makes sense, right? You're good at creating stuff. You should be good at identifying stuff too. We talked a little bit about Shard of Creation already, but let's go ahead and read into it a little bit more. It vanishes if you are slain or if it's not in your possession for more than 24 consecutive hours. If it's destroyed or you lose it, you can perform a 1-hour ritual to create it again. You can make these number of these equal to your intelligence modifier and get all charges back when you finish a long rest. All right, so you have a couple of options here. We have Inspire. Inspire, when you make an ability check while touching the shard, regardless of its current form, you can spend 1 charge to roll a d6 and add the number rolled to your check result. So that's one feature of it, just to add a bonus to ability checks. Or Transform. While touching the shard, you can use an action to transform it into any type of non-magical weapon or shield, or into any object of medium size or smaller. So we kind of heard a little bit about this. The total value in gold pieces of an object created can't be more than 20 times your Mechanist level. Transform shard remain in its new form until you die. Use an action to return it to its original state, or use an action to transform it again. No matter what the shape it assumes, those who handle the shard can sense something strange about it. The shard can't be passed off as a typical item for purposes of buying and selling. Yep, basically nipping that in the bud, because I can already see people attempting to just see how much money they can extort by making whatever weird objects and attempting to sell it, only to have the, to cheat the merchants. But now they've kind of added in dialogue here to kind of nip that in the bud. Augment at level 2. You gain the ability to channel magical energies into items. To use this ability, you must spend 1 hour focusing on the item you wish to augment while remaining in physical contact with it. You gain 2 augment effects of your choice. Augment effect options are detailed at the end of this class description, so we won't actually be able to see them, unfortunately. At certain Mechanist levels, you gain additional augment effects of your choice, as shown in the augment effects known column, which we'll look at here in a second. When you use this ability, choose an effect from those you know. Regardless of the effect, an augmented item is considered a magic item while the effect remains active. You can apply these effects to existing magic items, and any bonuses or features granted by an augment stack with any properties the magic item already has. Unless specified otherwise, a chosen effect lasts indefinitely, but as an action, you can touch an item to end an ongoing effect. However, an item can only bear 1 effect at a time. The maximum number of items you can create is listed in the augmented items column there. If you try to exceed your maximum, you choose 1 to end. You can also augment your transform shard of creation, provided its form meets the requirements for the chosen effect. And you can see here, right, here's the sort of table. Augment effects known start at 2, end at 9, and total of 7 augmented items all the way up to level 17. And we can see the top little bit here of efficient action, which is a level 2 ability. You can use a bonus action to take the use an object action or to perform a weapon option, which is in Chapter 5. They're kind of like, almost like the maneuvers that you have in Baldur's Gate, the kind of advanced things you can usually do once per short rest. I believe those are what weapon options are in Tales of the Valiant, so you'll notice some similarities there. And then again, the use an object action as a bonus action is pretty nice depending on what kind of things your DM allows you to do with that. So that's unfortunately all we have right now for TOV Tuesday, but it is Sunday as of me recording this, so we're just a couple days away from another TOV Tuesday. So be on the lookout for this to be an ongoing series as we continue to cover more interesting facts about Tales of the Valiant as it gets closer to being in all of our hands officially. Also, we'll be doing coverage of that once it releases, and coverage of a bunch of other things as time goes on. So let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.